Awesome.
Wald.
Wald, the one and only. We have Joel Wald here with us, guys, on the Info Profit podcast. This is where we help highlight and showcase the untold stories of those who have been able to turn their passions into profit, skills into sales, or their knowledge into something very impactful. So, here we're going to be talking about the mental and strategic game of poker. So, I'm kind of interested in that. I'm not that good myself. I've played once in my lifetime, so I'm interested, but I did live in Vegas for quite some time. So I was surrounded by the game a lot. But Joel, I appreciate you being on here, sir, and I look forward to diving into your story.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. I'm happy to be here.
So poker has been one of those things. People love it, they hate it, they're fascinated about it. They, think maybe it's not something that people should be doing. I'm curious, how did you come about this game, or like what drove you into diving into this world of poker? How did you get started?
Yeah, I mean, like many people, I got into it just by playing with some friends, and I never thought this was going to ever be more than like a hobby. And then graduate school rolled around, and I was looking for a way to make a little bit of side money apart from my courses. I was in a data analytics master's program, and a few lucky things happened. I had a friend give me a poker book at that time that was awesome. I had another friend recommend a bar poker league to me. And I tried it out and I ran really good my first tournament. I definitely didn't play well. I didn't really know what I was doing at that point, and I won the tournament. And after that, I was pretty hooked. And I just started treating poker like almost like another graduate school course. I read a ton of books, I watched a ton of content, started moving up in stakes. And from there, I was hired as a coach of a pretty popular training company, and I got like the experience of what it was like to run a poker business. And I fell in love with coaching and learned just how much I loved like getting the most out of other people, and went on to want to do it myself.
That's incredible, man. I always find it interesting that typically coaches or consultants, they build their practice literally off something they just kind of fell into.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds like that was this, you're in the same case, which is great. But I didn't even know they had coaching for this industry, like poker specifically, but I guess it makes sense. I mean, coaching can be for any and everything,
Absolutely.
especially when you're dealing with stakes, quote unquote, that high, and you're looking at professionals. Any professional has a coach, so it only makes sense that you kind of got into that world as well too. But you said you come from an analytics background, data
Mhm.
analytics and stuff. How
Yep.
much does that, because it's pretty taboo, right? It's in the sense of like counting cards. How does that play into the factor, like the analytical side, to playing the actual game? Or what's
Yeah,
been
for
your
sure. I mean,
experience?
so with poker, it's a little more of like calculating equities and looking at pot odds. It's not as much like counting cards is very valuable for like blackjack, but
Okay,
for
that's what I
poker,
thought.
yeah, but both are very quantitative games for sure. So I think the skill set does help. At the same time, I think we've kind of gone off the deep end with how
Yeah.
important analytics is with poker. Like all these people are just obsessed with solvers and GTO and theory, and we've kind of lost track of the human element and kind of the personal. And that's a big reason why I wanted to start PTO Poker. It literally stands for Player Theory Optimal or Paid Time Off, whichever you like better. And the focus is like not on how do we beat these supercomputers and the analytics. It's how do we actually play the very best game we can against the human beings in front of us.
Gotcha. Okay. And for people that don't know, like myself, right? You got the rise of the solvers, the is it HUDs or the HUDs, and these advanced analytics. Like, what does that mean? Help me to understand a little bit of that world.
Yeah, so basically, well, HUDs are a little different. HUDs are used for online poker players. They're basically databases that capture all of the statistics as they're playing on various, like, what are you doing on the flop, turn and river, what are your frequencies, this type of thing. And then you can review that data and learn from it and get better. Solvers are more of the new thing. They are the thing that essentially it's a technology that shows you how to play pretty much every spot in the poker game tree heads up, and it arrives at an equilibrium where two computers are essentially battling. They know each other's strategies, and based on knowing the other computer's strategy, this is the optimal move to do. Okay, so
Hmm.
there are clearly major differences with that and the realities of like what's actually happening in a live poker game where we're
Yeah.
playing against human beings. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And are you typically like coaching and training people for real life games or the online games? Okay.
Yeah,
Got
I'm
you.
doing both. More of my clients play live than online, but they
Hmm.
definitely play both. I would say for right now, online poker's got a few extra complications that are not present in live poker, and I think partly due
Yeah,
to the AI, and we'll get to that later. But
of course.
yeah, it's definitely led to some issues, and there've been some some issues with real-time assistance and cheating and whatnot.
Got you. Okay. And
Yep.
I'm happy you said that because obviously, as things evolve, they transform, maybe the game or just the industries in themselves do end up changing. How have you seen, I guess, the more traditional institutional route of like learning how to properly play this, advance your techniques versus the modern data-driven analytics side of things? How do like you go about actually combating those two with like the people you're coaching?
Yeah, I think they very much go together. It's important to give people the theoretical baseline of like how do you play a certain spot? Why are we doing this with our, and the
Hmm.
entire range of hands we could have in this particular situation? How do we play that range of possibilities? And why are we doing it? And what's the theoretical basis for it? With that said, the intuition side comes in when you realize that this baseline case is very different from the situation that's in front of my face right now. This person is not
Hmm.
behaving like a human, like a computer. He's doing things very, very differently. And I need to find the right adjustments in this moment, or I'm going to get run
Okay.
over. So it's recognizing the difference between like reality and theory and making the right
Yeah.
adjustments based on that.
Got you. Because from what I hear, oftentimes, especially in that game, it's you're playing the person, not too much of like the hand itself, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's what you're talking about when it's like that human aspect.
Yeah.
How much of that psychology, or like I don't know if it's necessary sociology, but like that human dynamic that a person's really learning outside of just the technical skills of like the river or the flush, how much of that is involved when like learning just human dynamics when people
Yeah.
as well?
I think it's huge because, like, example is you get to the river, the last card of the hand, and theory may tell you you're supposed to call with a particular hand. Like it's
Yeah.
high enough in your range, it's good enough where you don't call with this hand, you're just gonna be giving up money. However, you know something about the tendencies of your opponent. You know
Mm,
that he is not somebody that likes to bluff in this spot. He tends to give up. And so now all of a sudden, this hand that was kind of at equilibrium, it's now a losing call, and we should find a fold, which is an exploit. So things like that, where you know what's supposed to be happening here, but then you know the human tendency and you pivot away.
gotcha. Okay. One the reason I ask is because one of my favorite movies and just overall people is James Bond, and you got the Casino Royale, and I
Yeah, yeah,
literally
yeah.
will watch it just
Nice.
for that scene of
Nice.
them like going back and forth,
Yeah.
and just like watching the dynamics between the people play, and I'm just like they're playing the person, they're not playing their. I mean, they're playing their hand as well too,
Yeah.
but it's just interesting seeing that, and I'm like, is that learned? Is that like something you just pick up on? Is it like just a character trait? Like how much is that really a person focuses in on when they're learning this game, that they have to, and it's like how much is it where it's like you're learning the person versus you also are learning yourself, because I think
Yes.
there's both sides of it, right?
Yes. Well, in James Bond, if you have a hand as strong as a straight flush, you're probably not going anywhere. There's not a whole lot of like people
Yeah,
reading,
that's
but
fair.
in real life, like it's I at least I'll talk from my own experience because
Yeah.
I came in with more of the math and the data background. I
Hmm.
started with more of the theory in place, and that's how I
Okay.
approach things. And over time, through playing enough live poker, I mean, I've now played over 10,000 hours of live poker. I've gathered enough patterns about like how do people behave in these spots. So it kind of like I had the initial framework, but I've moved away based on what I've seen and what my experience has informed, and now I
Yeah.
have a new model of how I approach spots.
Nice. I think that's interesting because it gives you a little bit of a competitive edge for people because you've done it not necessarily the reversed order, but
Yeah.
out of order than what it sounds like most people are kind of doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that are highly successful and they never learn that much about the technical. They're just so good at reading people and they're so intuitive and they
Yeah.
lean on that skill set. So there's place for all types of thinkers in poker.
Okay. Well, with that being said, like, what would you say is some of the biggest leaks or mistakes experienced players typically make on a day-to-day
Yeah,
basis?
yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest mistakes experienced players make tend to not even be strategy mistakes. They tend to be things tangential to the game, things related to managing their bankroll and their money effectively, being too overexposed in certain games where they can't handle it financially, not knowing how to deal with certain emotions that arise continuously. Like, even if they know the right play, they're not able to
Hmm.
find it because certain emotions kind of get in the way and block them and mess up their thought processes. So they tend to be mental, financial, and emotional in nature.
Hmm.
But on the strategy side, there are things too. Like, I think that a big street that affects all types of players, not just experienced players, is pre-flop play. And this is the street that, as you know, in poker, you play every single hand. So like, if you're messing this one up, it just compounds across all the streets. And if you get this one wrong, it's very hard to recover from.
Man, I guess not just experienced people. What would you say is the common mistake or flop for people getting started, I guess, in this space and learning the game?
When you come to poker, you're excited to play poker, and so you naturally want to play a bunch of hands. Hands are dealt to you, they look pretty. Your two cards are suited. You think you can make a flush with them. It's exciting. And you get in there with a lot of hands that actually do not have a good probability of winning. A lot of players, they play too loose, they play too many hands, and they play those hands too passively. So they're doing a lot of calling as opposed to raising. And the problem with this is, in poker, most hands miss most flops. So there's a very good chance that if you limp, somebody raises, you call, the board comes out, very good chance you miss that board. And so you're just slowly bleeding money by seeing all these flops with marginal hands where you have to then check, they bet, you fold. It's a very slow bleed.
Oh man, that reminds me of I think it's a book, but the concept of like death by thousand cuts,
Yes,
where it's just
that's what this is.
okay,
100%
yeah,
that's what this is. Yeah.
got you. Well, this talking about your business, the coaching aspect, and the services. You got a lot of free resources, right? Value of people can see like on YouTube, on your
Yeah.
actual website.
Yep.
Talk to me a little bit more about like the coaching aspect when you're talking to someone, identifying like where they are, what do they need
Yeah.
help with, and assistance. Like, how do you go about actually evaluating and providing the service for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything starts in my business typically with a free consult call. So they come and join me for 30 minutes, and it's just a chance for me to get to know them and what their goals are and learn where they're struggling. And it's a chance for me to build more or less a custom curriculum that meets their exact needs. So I think the personalization, the customization of it is different from a lot of coaching, where often, like, if you go to other training sites, it's like, come watch this digital content. Well, that digital content may not apply to like my exact needs. The other thing is, I'm very much offering not only strategy coaching, as I've mentioned, but also kind of coaching on the financial and the emotional side. So I feel out kind of what are the areas of need for this person, what type of program do we need to focus on, and then we go from there. And it's typically over Zoom, or I provide digital content to supplement the coaching.
Guys, you ever you ever get in a moment where it's like, hey, we're going to start this consultation off by us actually playing a game, playing a game or playing a hand?
That would be rare, although sometimes I will ask them for like a hand they played recently and what their thought process was, and I'll just kind of sit there and take some notes, and it's just a chance for me to understand like what variables they're considering and kind of what their blind spots are.
Okay, yeah, I figured that because I remember when I would do like personal coaching, like personal training, I would have them like work out with me. Like
Yeah,
some occasions, I'll be like, all right, because I just want to see and test and like see where that threshold is.
yeah,
And I found that to be very helpful at times, depending on who I was in front of. And then sometimes I'm just like more consultational. Let me see you move. Let me see what we're working with. Right. It just varies, but that'd be pretty interesting if I got onto a call. You're like, I'm gonna
yeah.
help you with poker, but you got to play me first.
You gotta
I'm
play
like,
me
whoa.
first. They're like,
Right.
oh, I thought this was free. I didn't know we had to put up money for this call.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. No, no, no. We're gonna play this hand. That's pretty
yeah,
awesome, man.
yeah.
So breaking down that approach, right? Having that consultation, which I think every coach, that's the key important part. Diagnosing who they're in front of, how to actually provide those strategic solutions to cater to where they specifically are right then and there and where they want to go to, right? But every player is different. They have their own backgrounds, their own, I won't say methodologies or kind of processes for that, but with so many different things as far as like the cash grabs, tournaments, mindset training, like is it important to cover all those things at once or like how do you go about structuring that custom approach? Because if I tell you like, hey, I need help on more of the mindset, and you're like, well, after further conversation, it sounds like you just need better understanding of the game,
Yeah.
right? Like, how do you go about, I guess, like diagnosing is what I like to call it, the person in
Yes.
front of you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And by the way, it's often the reverse. It's often the person comes to me and they're like,
Yeah,
only want to know the strategy side. I have no mental problems. I don't want to do mindset. I'm perfect on that
yeah.
side.
It's like,
And
well,
so
that's a red flag.
that's a red flag, right? Because if someone thinks that, like, I'm sitting there thinking, like, I've got some things that I'm still working on. Like, you got this all work. Yeah, but if that's their approach, I tend to like to lead with what they're interested in, right? So I will meet them on that front and give them the strategy knowledge they need. But I try to plant the seed that, hey, there may be some things we'll want to revisit here because very often I've had many students come to me, they say, I don't need this thing. I don't need mental game, but actually, upon further review, it's a big thing that's holding them back and affecting their strategy decisions. So I plant the seed, but I give them what they want first. And then as we're going through hands and I kind of probe for like, what made you do this? What made you do that? Why did you choose this line over this line? That's usually what gives us the direction that like, there are some gaps here. This is how we plug them.
Got you. And do you think this, like a majority of those challenges, specifically when it comes to mindset or emotion based, is due to like upbringing, traumas, current situation, like financially for where a person is or where they want to get to? Like, what's pretty common, I guess,
I mean,
across the board for those?
like all of that is possible, but I think just like if you're a human being, there's a very good chance that you have certain conditioning that holds you back from making good decisions. And it's especially likely to come out in spots where you're under pressure, especially financial and emotional pressure in the midst of a poker game. So it puts you to the test. Poker puts you to the test, I think, psychologically and emotionally, much more often in ways where maybe ordinary life, there's not like as much at stake on a day-to-day basis. So these things come out quite often, and that's why you can see them pretty visibly as a coach.
Got you. Okay. So, say for me, common person, don't really know too much, right? There's a lot of different tools and resources, frameworks, so forth out there, right? What specific, because I'm assuming you got like a specific kind of toolkit or study framework within the business, the PTO poker. What's a framework or kind of tool that you typically use when helping someone?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I use the solvers, right? Like I show
Mhm.
people this is how GTO Wizard works, this is how Pile Solver works, this is what it's assuming. So I show them how to functionally use it, and then I tell them kind of the blind spots of the tool. Like, hey, in this environment, this will not be a good tool. Or if you're playing at this stakes, let's not get into this tool yet, just yet. Let's, if you're playing, for example, like 2-5 no limit or below, let's use potentially Flopzilla instead.
Yeah.
Because Flopzilla, it's a little less advanced, but it also forces you to be the one inputting your assumptions, and it's more of an active practice. And I think that builds a really good muscle compared to a solver, which is a little more passive. You're kind of just looking at what it's telling you, and you're absorbing the data that way. So I use the programs that way. I'm helping them review their hands through the use of the programs, but I'm also, as I mentioned, trained in meditation, and I try
Yeah.
to build out various meditations and visualizations for them that are poker specific that kind of simulate those tough spots that they're likely to be in.
Gotcha. Okay. And are these beforehand practices during the hand, after? I'm assuming probably a combination of all three.
Combination of all three, yeah. I think all three are very important, but I think the beforehand, maybe even the most, just because my thinking is if you can't practice this type of thing in a quiet room by yourself, you're not going to be able to do this when all the money's on the line and nine other people are staring at you waiting for your decision. Like it's just, you have to do it in the quiet moments first, build up to the moments in game, and then learn to decompress from those moments.
I tell people it's almost in a sense like a science experiment.
Hmm.
You want to have it in a controlled environment before you
Yes.
decide to put it into like an uncontrolled environment.
100%.
And I think a lot of people don't take that approach and then
Yeah.
just wanting to get like try it out in the heat of the moment. It's like,
Yeah.
well, wait a minute, we need a baseline first. We need to
Yeah,
just
we need some
understand.
baseline.
Yeah, so that you
Yeah,
can take that on
yeah,
before kind of diving in. Now, out of curiosity, a lot of people get like a bad stigmatism. I don't say not a lot of people, but it has been known that a stigmatism with poker, right? And for me, poker is just it's another great card game. I love card games.
Yeah.
I've grown up playing card games, Uno,
Yep.
blackjack, you
Yeah.
name it, right? But I would say I think over time it has definitely transitioned and become a lot more open, especially as there's more games and there's more
Yeah.
platforms that's
Yep.
highlighting it, the educational side of it. How have you seen it like transform and evolve over time to
Yeah.
where it's kind of is now?
Yeah, for sure. I think there still is a stigma, but it's definitely gotten better. I think now
Yeah,
maybe it's closer to, I mean, for people who actually know the game, they perceive it closer to like say financial trading. It's like a
yeah,
very similar skill set and there's overlap there. For people who don't know the game, they walk into a casino and they see it lumped in with roulette and slots and blackjack and all these other
yeah.
forms of degeneracy where like you are destined to lose your money if you play these games long enough. And they don't differentiate that poker is a skill game that over time, if you do the right things, you can come out ahead.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think the shift has gone in the direction of considering it more of a skill-based game like trading, but we still have a lot of work to do. And I think part of that is demonstrating to people not only the skill involved on a technical side,
Hmm.
but showing them that doing these other things that are good for the rest of your life, like, developing an exercise regimen, eating right, meditating,
Yeah.
all these kind of lifestyle changes that come with being a good poker player are actually good for people. It's not just a
Hmm.
form of degeneracy where, you go and splurge a few $1,000 and, you just keep bleeding.
Yeah. No, I think you're hitting on something pretty key and crucial just for everything in life, right? Whatever you decide to take serious and be intentional about, there's going to be a lot of lessons for it, right? So back to kind of like the gym analogy, you can go to the gym and you can work out or exercise, but then you see a person who is actually training, like there's a specific regimen, like they're intentional, they're getting the results. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to like playing poker or playing specific you know, I don't part of my ignorance, like specific card games, is if you're doing it intentionally for the outcome to become better, I think there's some aspects that transitions back over into your own personal life. Because the reason I say this, one of the most successful people I know, she basically helps businesses to grow. Like she becomes the CEO of them, makes them better, and exits, and she's a big advocate for poker. Like she's astute, she studies it, and I'm like, well, what's that? It's not tangible, but what's those skill sets that's helping to transition over into like a person's day-to-day life in the game? Like if you had to think about like one or two things, like if a person who plays poker is like, okay, they're probably good at this and this in their life as well too.
Yes. I would say they tend to be people that are very good at making decisions under conditions of uncertainty.
Mm.
Some people just don't have that skill set. They don't know how to make decisions in that way. Poker players know how to do various things that create a little bit of structure and certainty within the uncertainty and kind of build out this
Yeah.
model where they can at least move forward to some extent. I think poker players are also good at working with discomfort, emotional discomfort, and feeling that through and still arriving at a place of groundedness where you can make level-headed decisions. And you know what? The other thing is they're good at pivoting. Like if they learn that this turned out to not work, it's not this like finality of like the whole thing was a failure, I'm a bust, it's all over. It's kind of like, no, this was an experiment. We learned something from it. How do we apply this to the next thing so our next step is more informed? It wasn't a waste of time because now we've ruled out this way of doing things.
Got you. So what I'm hearing about out of that is there's a version of consistency that's involved. And my question for you then is like, how do you help people to gain that consistency, but specifically like high performers in this space maintain that type of consistency? Because I can imagine over time, not a burnout, but it's like, okay, when you're playing at such a high level so often, something's bound to happen. It's like a car that's going 100 miles per hour
Yeah.
for hours. It's like something's bound to break down. So how do you kind of have like check in or maintain a peak performance with a player who's performing at that?
Yeah, 100%. And the reality is sometimes the car does break down. I mean, we saw in the Super
Yeah.
Bowl, we just saw Patrick Mahomes, the ultimate top
Yeah.
performer. He broke down on the biggest stage and came up flat. And
Ooh,
and
that was
so
crazy.
It is crazy and totally unexpected, but then there's a separate skill set of how do you pick yourself back up off the mat when that
Yeah.
happens. And so that's the other skill of a poker player. It's like we're going to do all these things to put you in position to succeed. We're going to give you the
Yeah.
preparation you need in terms of what sleep to have, what diet, what meditation training, what exercise, and what study. But then, in the moment, we're going to give you some things you can do to be very grounded in your body, to be centered with your breathing, to be following the action in a certain way so that you are priming your conscious mind to make the best decisions. But inevitably, we are playing a game of imperfect information. You are going to make some mistakes from time to time. You're going to have losing days, and sometimes you're going to fall flat the way Mahomes did. And then
Yeah.
it's like, what do you do the next day? How do you pick yourself back
Correct.
off the mat? And there's a whole process for that as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I remember watching the game because I won't say I was going for the Chiefs. I was open for either one winning. I'm not too tied to either party, but I remember watching the game and I'm just like, the Chiefs just need some form of a win. Like give them something. And then moment that happens, I'm like, this game is going to get a lot more interesting. And the moment
Yeah,
they did and they got it, it's like, okay, spirits are a little bit higher. Now they're performing a little bit better. They ended up getting another one. And I think that's like just in general for people across the board. And these little, I would say tools or habits or mantras or whatever you want to call them that you're helping these people to implement is being able to get those little wins and victories so that they can continuously perform at the state that they need to, regardless if it is a loss or not. So it's like, hey, you might have lost. That's fine, but still incorporate these small little wins that will allow you the opportunity to win the next hand.
100%. Yeah, again, so many times in poker, you do the correct thing and you still lose a bunch of money because of the roll of luck. And then it's how do we recenter? How do we play the next hand as best we can, not let the last hand impact future decision making?
Yeah. Well, with that being said, because poker isn't something that's like straightforward, right? I mean, there's a lot of different variables that kind of go into play with that.
Yeah.
How do you go about like tracking progress, I guess, when working with someone? Because you have the emotional side, you have the mental, but then you have the actual tactical side as well too. Like what I call KPIs or measurements that you're looking to improve, and how do you kind of really track that with working with someone?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways it might be easier for online players just because you do have the HUD
Yeah.
that's capturing all of that data so you can see are your frequencies approaching more of like an optimal type frequency. But with
Hmm.
that said, with live poker players, the biggest thing I look for is what are their thought processes? What are they expressing to me as they're explaining the hands and what variables are they considering?
Yeah.
Because like even if they make the right decision of like call versus fold, but they like the process of how they got there is completely incomplete. I'm not giving them
Yeah.
credit for that. Like they're not going to be able to replicate that. It's like, oh, I this guy bet really big and I don't like him, so I called and I was right. Like, okay, no, we're not we haven't made
We're not.
progress, just made a bunch of money there. So yeah, so anyways, it is that mix of their thought process,
Hmm.
their execution in the moment. And yeah, I mean their results play a role, but I tend to look at results, I think results for live poker only become significant once you've hit like, say, 800 hours, like that big of a
Yeah.
sample. So we take those short-term results with a bit of a grain of salt until we get to that volume. In the
Hmm.
meantime, I really want to hear the right thought processes and see the right habits of preparation.
Got you. So two things really stuck out. One, I got slight PTSD, even though I love math and science versus like English or history, but it
Yeah.
reminds me of like doing homework or
Yeah.
taking a quiz, and it's like, here's the answer. It's like, yeah, but how did you get to the answer? I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
I just know this is the answer. They're like, no,
Yeah.
but I got to see the work progress, and it's like,
Yeah.
why would I give you the answer? But
Yeah.
when you think about it, it does make sense because if you're able to showcase, you're one able to then replicate as well too,
Exactly.
and to be able to make those maneuvers as needed. So it's funny how like sometimes it's like, oh, this isn't going to work for me like later down the road, right?
Mhm.
Like, why am I doing long division? And it's like, yes, technically, but the same concept applies then to other areas in life.
Yeah.
Looking backwards.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, there are processes in poker that are not just the long thought out processes. There's also
Yeah.
the intuitive, but there's a process behind that too of like being very centered in your body, being very
Hmm.
rooted, paying the right type of attention, being willing to kind of zoom out with your attention at the right moments. And I want to hear that type of thing when the person
Yeah.
comes to some intuition so they know how they're arriving at those intuitions.
Gotcha. Is it would you say like that's like the critical thinking, I guess, aspect of part of
Maybe,
it, or
maybe I mean, I think of critical thinking more like the analytics, the hard numbers
okay.
of the situation. And I tend to think of the intuitive more as like, boy, I just feel like he doesn't have it. I just
Mm,
feel physically in my body right now like this guy does not have it, and I want to follow that gut instinct.
yeah.
And I think those two can very much inform one another.
I agree. It's it's interesting because again, back to like the training nutritional side, or they talk
Yeah,
about the conversation where it's like use your head, but use your gut intuition because in a way it is a version of like it's your second brain,
yeah,
right? So then when you look at the other aspects of like, hey, you're getting prepared for the game, you feel off. Okay, well, what did you do before coming to the game to play this hand? Like, what was
exactly.
your weekend preparation? How did
Yeah,
you sleep? Because all those factors are going to mess with like your internal brain, your
yeah,
gut intuition, which then is going to help or going to cause you to act a certain way in
yeah,
your physical brain,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I agree, definitely.
Gotcha. Now, I know we talked about analytics, we talked about different tools, and I can't help but to ask the question because it's very big, especially and it's prevalent where it talks about AI and automation, right? Now, I don't know how much of it you kind of use in practice or what, like how the poker industry is like adopting to it. I would guess that it's been very interesting figuring out how do you integrate these tools.
Mhm.
I would think that it's more on the training aspect than the actual playing like a live game, right? But how has the mix of those skills and strategies kind of been implemented into the world of poker so far? Like, are you currently using them, or is the industry itself incorporating them
Yeah, I mean, I use them pregame. I use them to study
pre-game?
various spots. I
Okay,
use them to learn from previous hands that I have played. I can take the hand, go back into the tool and see, did I play the hand at equilibrium or not? Does the tool recommend a different play than the one I did? And then I'll make the decision. Like, do I want to override what I did and learn from the tool? Or do I want to stand pat and keep doing my own strategy?
yeah,
So I think the tools are very helpful for pregame. The
okay,
problem is these tools are sometimes being used in the middle of the game, which is a form of cheating. So in online poker, it's hard to detect. I mean, it's like, if you've ever played like chess, for example, you're online,
that's
you're
what I was
playing
thinking.
on chess.com, and every now and then you get this little notice from chess.com saying you've been awarded back 10 rating points because your opponent was using a chess engine while he was playing against you. And so it's trivial in chess because there's no money on the line. It's like, why is this
Correct.
guy even doing this? But in
Yeah,
poker, it's like there's actually a lot of money to be made, and this is a significant
yeah,
problem if they're not detecting it. And online poker right now, it's not been legalized, so there's not a lot of money in the detection of it.
correct.
So that's an issue for online. For live, there have been other issues of people like, at a tournament looking on their phones at these solver engines.
Hmm.
And so casinos are starting to crack down on phone usage during hands
Yeah.
as they should, because we need to preserve the purity of the game and have it be so that human beings are playing against other human beings, albeit, you can use the study aids on the side, but not while you're in the hand.
Do you think this is going to potentially change or alter the way the game is going to get played then? Or do you, okay.
Yeah, I think it already has. I mean, I think people are doing things strategically they never used to do. We used to,
Yeah,
for example, on the flop, people used to continuation bet much, much larger than they do now that they've studied with solvers and they know the efficacy of like a small bet can work very well in a lot of spots. So we've already learned a lot of things from these tools. With that said, people who use the term like solved, like the game is now solved, they're not understanding all the limitations of these tools. Like
yeah.
the biggest one being in live poker, typically when you're in a hand, you're in a hand against multiple players. These tools are only built for heads up play. They break down, their equilibriums are completely unstable once there's more than two people. And so we need to take that with a grain of salt. The tools also struggle once the stack sizes get to a certain level. So, like, there are a lot of limitations to these things. In addition, probably the biggest limitation is the tools depend on the right assumptions being put in. And so if your
Input
opponent is
versus output.
playing different from those assumptions, it's kind of like bad data in, bad data out.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think that's the biggest thing people don't understand when they utilize these tools. We use them to help integrate people as well, is the input is so crucial, especially if you're
Yes.
looking for a specific output. But you can just
Yes.
look at anything in life, right? We, in a way, are machines, right? I mean, that's what I've been told. Where the specific information and knowledge you're given, right? The specific information and knowledge you're given to someone who wants to learn or become better is very important to then get the end result. And there's no difference when we're looking at these different AI automation tools as well as we have to be very specific on what we're telling it in order to then get the outcome that we would want most
Yeah.
out of it as well too. And I think that might come with like the regulations that you're talking about and just cracking down on it. But as AI continues to advance, do you think it's going to be like a good benefit or maybe a hindrance to the game, um, and the experience, or just
Oh,
different?
definitely just different. I think it's
Different.
bad for online poker until we figure out a way to regulate it. I think it's
Yeah.
clearly bad. For live poker, I think it's very easily regulated, and
Hmm.
so it doesn't necessarily need to be a problem. It just means that games will get tougher. People will improve faster, but I still think that it's never going to ruin live poker because of the
Yeah.
human element and because of, even if you knew every single thing that the solver engine knows to do, it's a whole different matter of executing that with money on the line and with pressure and all
Correct.
of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that goes back into that concept where it's like you end up playing the player. It's like,
Yes.
hey, even this tool is telling you, and it is
Yes.
generated to give you the best outcome. But if
Yes.
the person in front of you is like
Right.
taunting and talking and
Right.
doing these things, it's going to play with you. So
Exactly.
and like I had a previous podcast with someone, and that was the conversation we were saying because the field that they're in is agricultural and working with farmers, and it's like, hey, as much as this still is going to be useful, at the end of the day, we still have to have that human touch.
Yeah.
And I think in this space, that's what it's going to come down to, specifically when playing in person as well too.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's just interesting and fascinating. Why poker though? Because there's so many different games out there. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoy it, but like for yourself, I know you kind of got thrown into it. It was something somebody gave you a book about and taught you, but like why poker and maybe not like some of the other games, or what are some of the other? I won't. Sorry if I'm saying this wrong as far as game, but what other things that's similar to poker that you still enjoy
Yeah.
doing?
No, it's a great question. I actually was very into chess prior to poker.
Okay.
Chess is the ultimate strategy game. The problem with
Yes.
chess is there's no money in chess. So people very quickly know where they stand in chess, and if they're outmatched, they're not going to put up money against you. And so if you're not one of the top, 50 players in the world, you're really struggling to make a living in chess. Compare that to poker, where maybe if you're one of the top, I don't know, even like 10,000 players in the world, you can still make a decent living from the game. Uh, the difference is with poker, it's all based around people's perceived level of ability. If they
Hmm.
think they're better than they are, they're willing to play in games that maybe they don't belong, or vice versa. And that creates the poker market. And there's no like concrete number where people can point to it and say, he's a 2000 level player, he's a
Yeah.
1500 level player. It's everybody's perception, and that's what creates these games. And because people don't know exactly where they stand, and variance confuses the process because sometimes even the bad players get lucky and beat the good players, and now that reaffirms that they're better than the good players. So now the game goes on, right? And it goes on for a long time. So to answer your question, poker, because it's the strategy aspect of chess, it's the psychological, interpersonal, like really interesting dimension as well. There's a data component, but you can make a living off the game compared to other forms of gambling where you really can't,
Hmm.
or like chess, which is too skill based where you really can't.
Got you. Do you think
Yeah.
everybody, I want to say, do you think everybody should, but would you recommend at least from a experience level for everyone to at least try it or understand the concepts of poker? Or is it like meant for specific people of specific character traits to then
No,
like dive
I
into
think
it?
specific character traits help, but I think anybody can learn the rules, and if anybody can learn to get better at these traits and learn to set out in a way where they're going to become a better player. You may have, like, if you're somebody who just like, you cannot sit still, you cannot do math, you just don't have the patience for the game, you're going to struggle. But
Yeah.
if you want to make those priorities, I think there's skills that you can learn.
Okay, that's what I think. Because I know sometimes, like for example, I always tell people, I don't care what background you are, what you're specifically doing. I
Yeah.
think everyone should learn the art of sales.
Hmm.
I have a big sales background, so that's just I'm
Yeah.
a little biased, but just in general,
Yeah.
the skill sets that you learn, it transitions over to your day to day. You're
Yes.
selling conversations, experience,
Yes.
like it doesn't matter. So I didn't know if poker maybe was one of those things where it's like the way the game is played and what you learn throughout of it, it's like
Yeah.
it's so universal
I
for
mean,
everybody.
I think it's pretty darn close to that.
Yeah.
I do think there's a subset of people that struggle to play the game in a responsible way, and for them, this is not a
Okay.
great avenue. But
Hmm.
for most people that can stay within their means, I think poker is an immensely valuable game.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's maybe potentially why people might go to chess then, because they're like, hey, maybe I don't have control of this area, but I still want that fix.
Yeah.
We'll go to chess.
Hmm. Hmm.
But you're like,
Yep.
hey, no, I got some control. I'm good. Let's see
Yeah.
what we can do.
Yeah, for sure.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, with that being said, we it's currently 2025. Where do you see kind of this game evolving and transforming into, say, the next like 5 years?
Yeah, I think the solvers are only going to become more prevalent. I think that they will advance with multi-way play, which is really going to tell us a lot about some of the things we see in live poker because so many of these pots involve four, five, six players, and we don't really have a theoretical baseline for what's supposed to be happening in these spots. So maybe the tools will be able to show us something, or maybe the tools will just show us that these spots are so complex that even we can't solve them, and it's kind of on you guys. You figure it out. So we'll see what ultimately happens with multi-way pots. Other trends, I worry about one trend, which is the privatization of games. I
Okay.
think that the public sphere is the most safe form of poker. You don't, if you're playing in a casino, you don't have to worry about like being robbed or being cheated to nearly the same extent that you do if you go off and play some private game and there's not the same level of protections. And my concern is there's now this movement of like a lot of the bad players in poker, they now know they're the bad players. And because they know that, they want to make certain demands if the game is going to run, because they know the other players want to play with them and they know they have leverage. So some of these players, they move the game into private spheres. And in the private spheres, they can make even more demands, like we need to play this format of the game. The buy-in is going to be
Oh, like
this.
house rules
The,
or something.
the house rules go down that rabbit hole, there is the potential for a lot more cheating and collusion and people getting exploited in ways that are not good for the game. So my hope is that poker remains in the public sphere and we just figure out ways to accommodate what players really want, but in an environment that's safe and that's accessible to all players.
No, that's fair. What comes to mind, and the reason I kind of asked that question, I don't know how much you pay attention to boxing, but you have the boxing space, and then there's this concept of like influencer boxing.
Mm,
So it's an extension to the boxing industry, but more people are now diving into like the influencers boxing and people bringing in like other people from like MMA to then get into these matches because they're just winning a lot, or not winning. There's a lot of money at stake
yeah,
and publicity and so forth. And in my mind, as I'm hearing you talk, is like, okay, well, will this happen in this particular industry where people are making these extensions of the traditional poker to have more control, put it in their favor, and then like they can capitalize more on it. And I think that happens in any specific industry, but it sounds like that's what you're talking about right now.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And when you watch poker streams now,
Hmm.
often it's not necessarily the very best players in the world that you're watching. You're watching the biggest personalities and the people that can
Yeah,
draw the
that's
biggest viewership for the game. And I think there is a place for that. People want to see that, but I wish there was more of a market for just like watching the purest form of competition in poker. And you could say this doesn't exist because like the nine best players in the world don't necessarily want to play against each other because that's going to be, they all know each other. They all know it's going to be a hard game. It might not be that
yeah.
profitable. So, for viewership to be able to provide and subsidize this entertainment experience so that they're
Hmm.
all getting a cut of the revenue, we can all see them battle. and it's like the poker gladiators going at it, I think would be really fun to watch as opposed to like just merely kind of the personalities.
Yeah. That's tough because then you it's like the conversation of those who are actually skilled and care about
Yeah.
the game,
Yeah.
wanting to see the greats
Yeah.
actually perform versus like I want to see entertainment. I want to see like I just want my mental stimulation, and that's where the more well-known influencer side comes into play
Yeah.
and figuring out how do you collaborate
Yeah.
that
I mean,
attention to gain more exposure.
here's the comparison. Like, take the NBA. Are you more excited to watch the
Yeah.
NBA Finals, or are you more excited to watch the NBA All-Star Weekend where the celebrities battle each other? Like, I'm
Yeah,
a lot more
that's
excited to watch the NBA Finals. I don't really care about watching like Kevin Hart shoot a three-pointer. I just not that in, so it's kind of that's how I feel about poker.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I think there's a way where they can coexist for sure, but I understand like making sure to keep what I call like the main thing, where it's like making sure we still keep the traditional poker and how it's played and those that are actually good at the game, so other people can enjoy. With that being said, then my question, not just about the game, but specifically for PTO poker, where do you see or want the vision to go in the next, year, 5 years for now as you're still building and kind of progressing?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to be known as the company that provides players with the best strategies to actually beat the opponents that are in front of them, the actual human opponents. We're not just playing against a solver computer using GTO, we are using player theory optimal strategies. But I
Hmm.
also want to be the company that is optimizing the players themselves. What are the things we need to do to optimize you as a player so we get the very best out of you from, what are you doing on the sleep front, the nutrition front, what are you doing in terms of your strategy preparation, and what types of meditation training are you putting in to be at your very best in those biggest moments. So I think just being known as kind of like the holistic poker company that, like, yeah, if you want the strategy side, we have that for you. We will give that to you, but
Hmm.
recognizing it's only a part of the pie and we have all these other things for you as well that will round you out as a poker player and help you in the rest of your life.
I like that, and literally the word that was coming to my mind was holistic. So I'm happy
Yeah.
that you said that you said
Yeah.
that. And it is important, right? You want to make sure these people are firing on all gears.
Hmm.
And the way to do that is making sure each cylinder is taken care of.
Yeah.
Now, for that, education training is very critical of helping to optimize people and just in general bring more awareness. I know you got a lot of great resources out there. Where can people find you, learn more about specifically who you are, what you do in this space?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely go for the free stuff first. Why not? Right. So join the
You got
YouTube
a
channel.
lot. I give you that. I took a look. I was like, he got the YouTube channel. He
Yeah,
got
yeah,
free
yeah.
resources on his actual page. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah,
you're
maybe too
good.
much.
Yeah, I was like, this wow, this he's very giving.
Yeah, yeah. So come for the YouTube channel. Like, why not? Subscribe to the site and the email list through the site. You'll get monthly content that's free. Also, as I mentioned, we have a digital online course, 30 videos, 12 hours of content. The first six of those videos are free, so definitely check those out. And of course, I offer one-on-one coaching. But the thing to be on the lookout is in the spring, we're going to be offering a membership product, which combines one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and digital content. It's going to be a low cost, only $49 a month membership. And I think it's a great way to get your foot into poker coaching, dip your toe in the water, see if it's for you, make sure you like my approach. And, if you do, the other resources will be great fits for you.
That is great. I'm going to be linking everything below as well in this video.
Awesome.
Last but not least, before we
Yeah.
close this thing out, what would you say is there's one insight that you would love to leave people, whether it's about the world of poker, specifically what you're doing, or just in general in life? What's the one insight you would love to leave people with?
Do kind of a two-part thing to people who are on the fence about getting into like starting their own business
Hmm.
and don't know where to start or where to make the leap. I would say just start doing something. Start doing something on the side. You don't need to quit your job just yet. Keep that in place so you don't have the financial pressure, but do something on the side where you can build up a skill set, You can gain a track record. You can make sure you actually like doing this thing for money, because sometimes a hobby is very different once it's for money. If you're ready to make the leap and you want to go for it, think of it like an experiment. And it's like you put a certain amount of time into it, a certain amount of money into it, and you're okay with losing that potentially if it quote unquote doesn't work out. Even if it doesn't work out, you're going to learn something from it that is going to be so immensely valuable that I think you won't regret the experience. And the last thing I would say is, if you do decide to go into coaching, which I just love it,
Mhm.
I live for this, is there's a real tendency, like, you have this certain knowledge, you think that I want to impart this knowledge, and you come more or less to your sessions as an advice giver. And I would say, if you can step back from that and more or less try to just be the space for what the other person is saying and what they need, and sometimes from there you respond and say things in ways that might be surprising to you, that are just perfect for the moment, and it's not something you would have ever said kind of with your preset agenda. So I know that was a lot, that was probably more than one thing, but that's what I
No, I
would
love
leave.
it.
Yeah.
No, you're hitting right on there. And there's a couple things that like stood out to me, and I was literally reflecting on. One, when it comes to the aspect of just start something. I tell people a lot, one of the biggest things we help people with is identifying a passion, a skill set, some kind of experience. Because that's one of the easiest ways to, per se, start a business is having a coaching offer, consulting. Because you already know potential solutions based off your experience anyway. So it's very easy to turn that into something pretty profitable as a service-based business. But two, what you were mentioning as far as like being an entrepreneur or starting a business is know that you may lose money throughout this process. But it reminded me when I got into like day trading that my coach told me, he was like, whatever you're deciding to start off with, like capital wise, he's like, start off with something that you like, you're already lost it. Like, don't like, know it's lost.
Yeah.
You're not getting it back. So whatever you
Yeah.
decide to invest in, just in your mind, know it's gone. I was like, okay. And it helped me change the perspective whenever I would day trade. Cause in my mind, I'm
Yes.
like, I've already had this as a sunk cost. I don't, it's, so I'm
Yes.
not looking for it to return. And it's the same concept when you're starting like a business is just know like, hey, there's going to be sunk costs that you don't really pay attention to. Just know there's going to be sunk,
Yeah.
like it's already going to be gone. Like there's
Yeah.
certain things you just don't get emotional about. It's a part of the game. Everybody goes through it. You're perfectly fine, and it's very critical and it's crucial. But also, with that being said, as on the coaching side, is being more of like that doctor approach where you're diagnosing, and you're not just looking to specifically go ahead and prescribe. You're diagnosing to figure out and meet them where they are to have that better overall like relationship and experience,
Yeah.
and provide them a better solution as
100%.
well.
Yeah, and some people will hear the advice about consider the money gone as like a very pessimistic thing, like,
Yeah,
oh my God, that sounds awful. But like, actually, I view it the opposite way. I think it's, once you consider that, like, that money, even in the worst case scenario, if we were to
correct.
lose this money, we would be fine in the rest of our life.
Hmm.
And allocating that up front and knowing that it's not going to touch you even if this experience fails, I think it allows you to approach the experience with a whole lot less fear and give you the best chance of success.
No, 100% agree. I'm happy that you shared that. As a reminder, even for myself, like
Yeah.
I invested into coaching, which is so funny. A lot of people are like, "You're a coach. Why are you investing into coaching?" I'm like, "That's
Hmm.
a whole different topic for a whole different
Yeah.
conversation." I'm like, my previous podcast that I was just on, we had this conversation where it's like back in the day, if you say you had a coach, people would look at you like there was something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you have coaching, and people are like, "Really? What kind of like?" It's
Yeah.
almost like a badge of honor now, where it's like, "Hey, I got to
Yes.
coach for this. I got to coach for this. I got to coach for this." So I tell people all the time, I'm like, do not hesitate. If there's something you're interested in, something you want to, become better in,
Yeah.
invest. Invest into a
Yes.
coach, expedite the process, learn from someone who knows what they're doing. That way you're not in this by yourself. I tell people the way if you have a stigma between like getting coaching is imagine like you're hiring an employee, right? You don't or a contractor, you don't second guess that you're hiring someone to do a job. It's the same thing with coaching. Like, hey, I want to become better at poker. I'm going to hire you as a coach. As like, even if I gotta mentally see it as like you being an employee, I'm gonna hire you as my coach to then get the job done, and then I'm not gonna
Exactly.
worry about like return of investment. I just want to get the job. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, if they took that mental approach, it
Yeah,
would help them get
100%.
more.
You know, if you don't, you're just paying for it in a different way. You're just paying for it in your time. So if, you know, what do you value more, your time or your money? That's ultimately the question.
That's true. This has been a pleasure. I appreciate your insights. One, helping me to understand a lot more of this space. Might have to start picking it up. I'm a blackjack guy myself, but
Yes.
I do enjoy poker.
Yeah.
But with that, Joel, I want to say thank you so much. I appreciate it, you guys. Definitely give them a follow. Check it out. And I hope to see you said in April, August. When are you
Yeah, definitely in
dropping?
April, the membership goes live.
April,
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much, Jermaine, for having me on. This was
of
tremendous.
course. Awesome. Till next time, guys. Peace.